Disclaimer.
In that judgment light, I realized I was part of the destruction.
My name is Amara Mokoena. I am 38 years old. I died for 7 minutes on March 12, 2021 in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Before I begin, please subscribe so more people can hear testimonies like this. Everything felt unreal when I opened my eyes again, as if the world I returned to was smaller than the one I left. The air around me carried a weight that did not belong to this side of life. I could still feel the echo of the courtroom, the fire beneath the glass, and the truth that struck deeper than death itself. I came back with memories no human heart should carry. Memories that refused to fade, even when breath returned. I knew that if I remained silent, the judgment I witnessed would not only haunt me, it would fail the marriages hanging on by quiet, hidden threads. So I am here to speak, trembling and honest, because what I saw changed everything. I sat at the edge of my bed in our home in Johannesburg, staring at the evening light slipping through the curtains. It stretched across the floor like a tired shadow, and for a moment I felt as if it mirrored me, stretched thin, silent, dimming more each day. The house was not quiet, but the noise inside it never reached my heart. Kobelo moved through the hallway with the heaviness of someone who had forgotten how to smile, and I knew that I had forgotten too. Our marriage had not always been like this. I remembered the early years, warmth, tenderness, long conversations, laughter that filled the rooms. People used to tell us that we looked like a couple who understood each other deeply. I believed them then. Yet somewhere between responsibilities, disappointments, and unspoken hurts, the bond between us began to fray. It happened slowly at first, almost gently, like fabric thinning over time. By the time we noticed the holes, they were already wide. In the present moment, it felt as if we were living together, but not living with each other. Kobelo stood at the kitchen counter, flipping through papers, his shoulders tense and raised slightly the way they always were when stress settled in. I watched him from the bedroom doorway, wanting to speak but feeling as though my voice had forgotten how to hold softness. A lump sat in my throat, thick and familiar. He looked up at me. "Are you going to say anything today, Amara?" His tone was not harsh, but it was sharp enough to prick the fragile surface of my heart. I swallowed. "I have nothing to say." That was not the truth. I had too much to say. I simply no longer trusted that my words would be heard. Sometimes silence felt safer than vulnerability. Yet that silence created its own wounds, deepening the distance between us. Kobelo sighed and turned away. That single gesture felt like a small door closing somewhere inside the house. Our days had begun to follow the same painful rhythm. Polite greetings. Stiff smiles. Conversations that circled around children, bills, responsibilities, but never around feelings. I felt myself shrinking, not physically, but emotionally, as if I had learned to fold myself into smaller and smaller shapes just to keep the peace. Instead, I only created more tension. The bitterness inside me grew quietly. It clung to every thought. It shadowed every moment. When Kobelo spoke dismissively, even unintentionally, I felt it like a bruise being pressed again. When he withdrew emotionally, I withdrew twice as far. I told myself that I was protecting my heart, but deep down I knew that I was also punishing him. I began to lose count of the nights I cried silently into my pillow. Not the kind of loud sobbing that demanded attention, no. Mine were slow tears that slipped down my face without sound, the kind that tasted like resignation. My throat often tightened until breathing itself felt like work. One afternoon, I overheard Kobelo speaking on the phone. I recognized the tiredness in his voice, the way frustration replaced tenderness. "I cannot keep trying by myself," he said. The words struck me deeply, because they echoed the very thing I had whispered about him in my mind. It dawned on me that both of us felt abandoned, although neither of us had truly left. The tension between us seeped into the smallest interactions. If he asked a question, my tone hardened defensively. If I tried to express something, his impatience surfaced quickly. We were no longer fighting with each other, we were fighting with our wounds. Every argument was a replay of previous years. Every silence carried the weight of stories we never told. One Thursday evening, I stood at the stove while Kobelo placed dishes on the table with an exasperated sigh. The sigh was small, but it felt enormous. My chest tightened. I felt anger rising. Not loud anger, but a silent, burning resentment that curled inside my ribs. Why am I the only one trying? He never listens. Maybe this marriage died before I even realized it. These thoughts came uninvited. They came often. I glanced at Kobelo. He looked tired too. His eyes no longer carried the spark I once fell in love with. They carried exhaustion and something like fear. I wondered if he felt as invisible as I did. But I did not ask. I simply folded the pain deeper into myself. The evening light faded further, and the house felt heavier. I felt my breath shorten as if the air had thickened. It occurred to me that love could suffocate too, not by volume, but by silence. And in that silence, something inside me edged closer to breaking. The next argument arrived not as thunder but as a slow widening of a crack that finally split the surface. It began with a question about money and ended somewhere far deeper. Questions about worth, about love, about who had been left to carry the burdens alone. Kobelo leaned against the kitchen counter, jaw clenched, and I felt the old ache I had learned to hide flare up like a flare in the dark. "You never tell me how you feel," he said, voice tight. "You shut me out and then wonder why I do not try." His words landed in me heavier than the plates we had stacked in the sink. I saw the shape of his frustration, the way it had been held like a hard stone for years. I felt the urge to answer with honesty. I wanted to tell him about the nights of crying into the pillow, about the way my chest tightened each time he turned away. But the honest words would make me vulnerable in a way I had been taught not to be. Instead, I spoke with a controlled edge. "I cannot always verbalize what you want me to say. I am tired." That answer sounded small even to my own ears. It was not a confession. It was a retreat. He moved closer, anger and exhaustion mixing in his face. "Tired? I am tired too. I come home and feel like I am walking into a room full of glass. I cannot touch anything without breaking it." His voice rose. The kitchen became smaller. The light above the table flickered for a moment and the sound of the city outside dimmed as if the world held its breath with us. Something in me recoiled. I felt heat climb into my neck, the old defensive reflex. I wanted to protect myself from being blamed. I wanted to strike back with words that would guard me from feeling small. I found the sentence already prepared in my head. "You never understand me," I said. "You only see what you want to see." The words were sharper than I expected. They cut the air between us into two precise parts. For a moment we both stood in the space we had made for years, two people with the same hurt, each believing the other was the cause. Kobelo slammed a hand down on the table. Plates rattled. The children from the next room started, their footsteps quick and anxious as they sensed the shift in tone. My heart pounded in my ears, loud, erratic, an animal sound that did not belong to anything calm. The room spun. I felt my knees grow weak. I put a hand to the table to steady myself and the wood shook under my fingers. The light above me seemed to strobe. Air tasted metallic in my mouth. For a second I thought it was just a panic attack. Something my sister had said might happen when pressure built too high. But this was different. A sharp pain stabbed beneath my breastbone, sudden and foreign. It spread like cold water through my arms. My fingers went numb. The floor seemed to tilt. I could hear Kobelo shouting, but his voice was muffled, as if I were hearing it through a thick wall. He reached for me. His hand brushed my arm and I felt heat and pleading all at once. Amara. Breathe with me. Talk to me. His words came close enough to be a physical thing, urgent and trembling. I tried to answer. The sound in my throat felt small and thin, like a frightened bird. I opened my mouth and only air came out. My chest tightened until breathing felt like pushing against a closed door. Sweat prickled at my temples. My vision blurred at the edges. The kitchen light fragmented into shards. My legs folded beneath me. I went down like a tree cut at its roots. The world made a slow move away from me, as if the house itself had decided to slide into another layer of existence. Kobelo's face changed from anger to horror. He leaned over me, shouting for his mother, for the neighbors, calling my name like a plea. Fingers slapped my face in a frantic, half-senseless attempt to wake me. I felt pressure around my chest, hands compressing, a voice screaming something about an ambulance. Sound stuttered in and out. Time thinned. There was a peculiar clarity in the middle of panic. The argument, the years of small hurts, the silent nights, all of it unfurled in a single, terrible reel. I saw the first time I had chosen silence over honesty. I saw the day I had allowed resentment to become a companion. I saw the moments when I had sheltered myself with pride instead of reaching for help. Each memory shone, precise and unforgiving. My heartbeat retreated from the world like a distant drum. It sounded small and far away. The room muffled further. I felt my consciousness beginning to leave the boundaries of my body as if something gentle and insistent was tugging at a loose thread. I heard Kobelo scream my full name, long, raw, a call that reached me under the surface of everything. His voice seemed to come from underwater, distorted yet aching with need. I felt hands lift me, the motion swift and clumsy. Light flared at the doorway when someone rushed in. The smell of disinfectant and fear entered the air. My breath made one last thin sound, like a note struck on glass. I thought of small things in that second, my mother's hands, the green door of the house I grew up in, the lullaby my grandmother had sung. I thought about never saying everything I needed to say. I thought about being seen but silent. Then the world folded away. I watched, without moving, as my own body slumped across the kitchen tiles. I saw the way Kobelo held me, a man suddenly without the armor he had built. I saw the tears burning tracks on his face and the rawness of regret there. I felt a pull, not frightening, not angry, but undeniable. A dim light opened ahead, a narrow slice of brightness that called and did not explain why. My last thought before the current finally lifted me was a single, raw question that echoed with every small choice I had made. Is this how I leave the world, in the middle of the thing I still love and still do not understand? Then I began to rise. The moment my body went still, something inside me broke free with a sharp release, like a thread snapping after years of strain. I rose without effort, without breath, without weight. 1 second I was pressed beneath the gravity of pain, and the next I hovered in a slow, stunned suspension above everything I thought I understood. I saw Kobelo's arms wrapped around my lifeless body. His hands trembled as he shook me, his voice cracking with desperation that would have been impossible for me to imagine even an hour before. His tears fell onto my cheeks, but I no longer felt them. I watched his chest heave as he cried my name, the syllables torn and uneven. And for the first time in years, I saw the fear in him, raw, unfiltered, honest. It struck something deep inside me, something I had buried under layers of resentment. But that moment did not last long. A wind without air moved around me. The kitchen blurred. The world tilted, then stretched, then bent into a narrow path of dim radiance. It looked like a passage carved out of silence itself. A hum vibrated through it, slow and rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, but not mine. Something ancient. Something holy. I felt myself drawn forward. The sound of Cobelo's cries grew distant as I drifted through the opening. My surroundings dissolved into a soft, trembling glow. Dim, yet deep, like moonlight trapped beneath water. Then everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Heavy quiet. Quiet with weight. I felt the truth of it pressing against my spirit. A faint echo of footsteps approached, though I saw no one. The ground beneath me shifted, turning from weightless air into something solid, glass, cold and luminous. Beneath that glass, fire moved in slow waves, glowing deep orange and gold, as if the flames carried memory instead of heat. My breath caught, though I did not need breath anymore. I stood in a vast chamber of light. A courtroom, but not earthly. Not human. Not symbolic. This was alive. Columns of radiance rose around me, stretching into heights I could not measure. Scrolls drifted in slow circles far above, some glowing brightly, some dim, each unrolling on its own, as if unseen hands traced the words written on them. The air smelled like something I could only describe as truth. Sharp but clean, familiar yet overwhelming. A thick presence settled into the chamber. It did not speak, but I felt watched, not in a fearful way, but in a completely exposed way. My hiding places evaporated. I knew where I was. Heaven's court of covenant. And I also knew why I was there. A deep vibration pulsed near me, and a massive book rose from the glass floor. It was taller than I was, glowing with a soft, almost sorrowful light. The cover shifted like living skin woven with light. When it opened, the air trembled. The pages turned themselves. My name shone on the first page, Amara Makona. Under it, another title appeared. Marriage Covenant Record. My knees weakened, though this body did not obey weakness. A scene emerged in front of me, floating, shimmering, alive. It was not a memory exactly. It was clearer than any memory. It felt like I was standing inside the truth of the moment, without distortion, without emotion trying to rewrite it. I saw myself in the early years with Cobelo. I saw my eyes filled with hope. I saw the tenderness in his gestures. Then the scene flickered, shifting. I saw the first time I pulled away from him after a disagreement. I remembered feeling justified, he had hurt me with his words. But here, in this light, I felt something much deeper. A ripple in the glass floor beneath me responded to the moment. The fire shifted, darker, then brighter. The unseen presence in the courtroom did not accuse me. It simply illuminated the truth. I watched another scene, the night Cobelo had opened up about losing his job years ago. In my memory I had comforted him. But the truth replayed differently. I saw my silence. I saw my impatience. I saw the moment he reached out for emotional support, and I met him with guarded distance. Not anger. Not cruelty. Just absence. And in this place, absence carried weight. My throat tightened. An emotion I could not name clawed its way up my chest. Why am I seeing this? I whispered, though my voice made no sound in the room. The presence moved around me again, warm, firm, unyielding. Another scene opened. This time it showed me crying in the bathroom on a night when Cobelo had spoken harshly. I remembered feeling alone, unloved, unseen. But the vision zoomed into something I had never noticed. He had stood outside the door. Hands against the wood. Forehead lowered. Silent. Hurting. Wanting to apologize, but not knowing how. The tears in my eyes burned hot. I had never known. I had never asked. Scene after scene unfolded, peeling back the layers of hurt I believed were simple. None of it absolved Kobelo. None of it blamed me unfairly. It was simply truth, unfiltered, precise, eternal. Then the voice came. Not thunder. Not whisper. A calm, firm presence that filled every corner of the chamber. Amara. My name felt weightless and heavy at the same time. You saw the wounds you received. Now you will see the wounds you gave. My entire being trembled. The next set of scenes began to form, darker, deeper, heavier. And I understood that this was only the beginning. The chamber darkened slightly, not with shadow but with gravity, as if the truth that was coming carried weight that the room itself respected. The fire beneath the glass floor shifted from gold to a deeper, heavier amber. I felt it in my spirit before the next vision even formed. My name glowed again on the open covenant book. A line beneath it slowly brightened until it pulsed. Emotional betrayals, recorded. My breath stalled. I did not realize that heaven kept record of what I dismissed as survival. The first scene appeared. I saw Kobelo sitting at the edge of our marriage bed months after our second child was born. His shoulders curved inward, his hands locked together, his chest rising and falling with the heaviness of someone drowning in silence. I remembered that night. I had been hurt by a comment he made earlier that day. I wanted him to apologize first. So I turned my back to him and pretended to sleep. But now, the truth replayed differently. He reached for me. Stopped midway. Pain flickered across his face. He whispered, "Please, Amara. I am trying." But my back was still turned. The chamber responded. A deep echo rang beneath the glass. The unseen presence moved closer, firm but sorrowful. You believed silence was protection, the voice said. But silence became punishment. My knees weakened. I felt the weight directly in my chest, like a slow crush. A second scene emerged. This time it showed a Saturday morning in our living room. Kobelo had approached me with an idea to improve our finances. I remembered feeling overwhelmed by everything, work, motherhood, exhaustion, so I brushed him off with irritation. But heaven highlighted something I never saw. His excitement faded instantly. His shoulders dropped. A deep insecurity surfaced in his eyes, a wound that traced back to childhood rejection. When I dismissed him, I touched that old wound without knowing. Tears burned in my eyes. I whispered, "I did not know. I did not know it hurt him like that." The presence responded gently but with truth sharper than any blade. Pain ignored is still pain given. The fire beneath the floor flickered brighter, casting molten reflections on my skin. I felt every word press into me, not as condemnation but as clarity I could no longer escape. The third scene was the hardest. It replayed a night I had forgotten, or perhaps avoided remembering. Kobelo and I had argued about something small, yet I was already full of resentment from earlier weeks. I told him, with a cold tone, maybe I would speak to you if you were worth speaking to. I remembered saying it. I remembered the anger fueling me. But here, I saw what he felt. The air around him cracked. A visible fracture formed in the vision, like a line of shattering glass running through his chest. It symbolized a covenant violation. My covenant violation. The unseen presence spoke again. Your words carried weight because your vows carried authority. A trembling ran through me. My hands shook. I felt exposed in a way that was painful but necessary. Then the final revelation began. A new page turned in the covenant book with a slow, echoing sound. It showed something I did not expect. What Kobelo carried alone. A series of scenes unfolded, ones I was not present for in life. I saw him sitting in his car outside our house, gripping the steering wheel as tears rolled down his face. I saw him speaking to God in small, broken sentences, "Please fix us. I do not know how to reach her anymore." I saw him Googling how to love a wife who shuts down emotionally. I saw him asking one of his friends for advice, only to receive laughter instead of counsel. The last vision cut deepest. I saw Kobelo standing outside our bedroom door one night with flowers he had bought after work. He stood there for several minutes, rehearsing what he planned to say. "I miss you. I want us to heal. I want us to try again." But when he opened the door and saw my cold expression, he folded. He placed the flowers quietly on the table, turned away, mumbled something about being tired. He never tried again after that night. Not because he stopped loving me, but because he stopped believing he knew how. My hands covered my face. The tears came too fast to catch. My heart felt split open by revelation after revelation. The voice of the presence came one final time. "Amara, you saw your hurt, but not his. Covenant reveals both." Marriage became toxic not through one wound, but through wounds left untreated. My spirit trembled as the fire beneath the floor surged upward in a column of light that wrapped around the covenant book. Every scene vanished. The chamber grew still again. I felt the next shift coming, something heavier, deeper, a turning point in the judgment itself. But before it began, the chamber softened just slightly, enough for my spirit to breathe. If you are still here, thank you. Please subscribe if you want more testimonies like this. The light around the covenant book dimmed, folding inward like a great door closing. A sudden pressure gripped my chest, sharp, electric, almost violent. The courtroom dissolved. The glass floor shattered into streaks of brightness. I felt myself being pulled backward with terrifying speed, as if the entire afterlife had released me in one unrelenting exhale. I did not want to return. Not yet. Not with truth this raw. But the pull was merciless. A deafening snap echoed through my spirit. And I fell. My body slammed into reality with a force that tore a scream from somewhere deep inside me. Air punched into my lungs like fire. My eyes flew open. Bright hospital lights stabbed through them, cold and merciless. My chest convulsed under the hands of a nurse who was still pressing down for CPR. "Her heart is back. Continue oxygen. Amara, stay with us." Voices collided around me, urgent, trembling, disbelieving. My vision blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again. The room smelled of antiseptic and panic. A tube scraped down my throat. My hands jerked violently as consciousness returned with painful, jagged edges. Every nerve felt electric, like I had been shocked awake from beneath the earth. Someone held my wrist. Warm fingers. Shaking fingers. I forced my eyes toward the sound. Kobelo. His face hovered above mine, eyes swollen, breath uneven. His entire body trembled like someone who had been running through grief in circles. The moment our eyes met, something shifted in him, a release, a break, a confession without words. "Amara," his voice cracked, raw from crying. "Do not leave me. Please." I did not know. I did not know. The sincerity in his tone tore through me with more force than any argument ever had. His shoulders collapsed as he lowered his forehead against my arm. For a moment he simply wept there, unguarded, unashamed. And I felt it. All the moments heaven showed me. All the wounds I gave. All the wounds he carried. They returned like waves hitting shore after shore. I tried to speak, but the tube in my throat made my voice a trapped ache. Tears slipped from the corners of my eyes, falling down my temples into the sheets. Each tear felt heavy, carrying the weight of revelation. My heart hurt, not from the collapse, not from the return, but from seeing him through heaven's eyes instead of mine. The nurses adjusted machines and whispered updates, but their voices became a distant hum. My focus stayed on Kobelo. His hands held mine so tightly they seemed afraid I would vanish again. The weight of covenant truth pressed against my ribs as if the judgment room still echoed inside me. Images flashed quick and sharp behind my eyes. Me turning my back on him. His hands trembling outside the bathroom door. The flowers he could not bring himself to give. The fracture that formed when my words broke something in him. I gasped, not from pain, but from recognition. I had come back different. I had come back with eyes that could no longer lie. Not to him. Not to myself. Not to God. Kobelo lifted his head slowly, wiping his cheeks with the back of his hand. He looked at me as if seeing me alive was a miracle he would never be able to explain. I cannot lose you, he whispered. I am sorry for everything I did not fix. I am sorry for everything I did not say. Just, please come back fully. Please. His apology did not erase anything. It simply opened the door to what needed to happen next. My body trembled as I tightened my fingers weakly around his. It was the closest I could come to saying, I saw everything. I understand now. We cannot continue the way we were. The nurse checked my vitals, asking questions I barely processed. But my spirit was elsewhere, caught between earth and the remembrance of heaven. I had returned. But I had not returned empty. I had come back with truth. Truth that would reshape everything. And Kobelo saw it in my eyes before I ever said a word. The days after my return moved slowly. My body recovered gradually, but my spirit had changed instantly. Every interaction felt stripped of its old layers. I saw everything, every wound, every need, every cry for connection, with new clarity. Back home, Kobelo walked with a softness I had never seen before. He hovered near me, not out of fear but out of renewed intention. When he spoke, his voice held weight. When he listened fully. Yet the healing that needed to happen inside me could not be carried by him. It had to begin with truth. On the second week after my discharge, we sat together in the living room. It was evening. The children were asleep. The house was quiet in a way that felt open instead of suffocating. We sat across from each other, hands intertwined, our eyes meeting without the walls that once stood between us. Kobelo, I began, with a voice gentler than I remembered having, I saw what I did not want to see. Not only about you, but about myself. He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I know I failed you too, Amara. I know I ignored things that mattered. I shook my head. This is not about blame anymore. It is about truth. And so I told him. Not the shallow truth. The deep truth. The truth heaven showed me. I told him about the night he stood outside the bathroom, wanting to comfort me but unsure how. I told him about the flowers he tried to give me and the moment he folded when he saw my guarded eyes. I told him about the fracture I caused with a single cruel sentence. I told him how covenant magnified every choice, his and mine. As I spoke, tears slid quietly down his face. Not tears of shame. Tears of recognition. I never wanted to hurt you, he whispered. I just did not know how to reach you anymore. And I did not know how to let you, I answered. We sat there in the soft lamplight, holding the truth between us like something delicate and holy. For the first time in years. We saw each other. Truly. The problems were now clear. We both withdrew emotionally. I shut down when hurt. He shut down when overwhelmed. We allowed silence to become a weapon. We stopped asking real questions. Are you afraid? Are you lonely? Do you feel valued? These questions never passed our lips. We defended ourselves instead of defending our marriage. We waited for the other person to make the first move. And these problems nearly killed me. But heaven showed me something else. Problems do not destroy marriages. Silence does. Solutions began small, but they were real. We started with the basics. Heavy checkmark daily honesty, even when uncomfortable. Heavy checkmark scheduled emotional check-ins, how is your heart today? Heavy checkmark setting boundaries for tone and communication. Heavy checkmark addressing wounds immediately, not storing them. Heavy checkmark speaking blessings aloud, not waiting for the perfect moment. Heavy checkmark praying together, even when our voices shook. Heavy checkmark therapy, real therapy. Because healing deserves tools, not guesses. Cabello began initiating gentle conversations. Not lectures. Not corrections. Conversations. I began letting myself be seen, truly seen, in ways I had long avoided. It felt awkward at first. Vulnerability always feels like standing without armor. But with each confession, each truth, each tearful talk, the marriage we thought was dying began to breathe again. Our children noticed before we did. One evening my daughter hugged me longer than usual and said, "Mommy, the house feels warm again." That statement nearly broke me with gratitude. And then the urge to share the testimony began. It happened unexpectedly. I was sitting alone one afternoon when the memory of the covenant courtroom pulsed in my spirit. The fire beneath the glass, the scrolls turning, the voice speaking truth, it filled me with a holy trembling. This was not just for me. This was for others. For couples suffocating quietly. For marriages dying in silence. For people like me, hurt, bitter, unseen, and unaware of the wounds they were giving. I felt a strong, unmistakable push in my spirit. Tell them what you saw. So I began small. I shared with my women's fellowship group. Then at a marriage seminar. Then at a Sunday service in Soweto where couples wept openly as I described the covenant book. I told them. Heaven does not judge marriages by big sins alone. Heaven measures every silence, every withheld affection, every moment we push our spouse away because of unspoken pain. As I spoke, people cried. Men wiped tears quietly. Women nodded with knowing heaviness. Couples held hands for the first time in months. The testimony spread faster than I expected. Friends shared it with friends. Pastors shared it with congregations. Soon married couples I had never met were calling, messaging, and saying, "Your testimony saved us. Your story exposed us. Your experience woke us up." And I understood why God allowed me to return. Not to frighten people. Not to shame people. But to warn them with love. Covenant is alive. Marriage is spiritual. And silence is not neutral. Everything we do in marriage echoes in a realm we cannot see. The final warning. The night before I recorded the testimony publicly, I prayed alone in my living room. The presence I felt in the courtroom. I felt again. Not terrifying. Steady. Holy. Clear. And I heard this in my spirit. Tell them to look at their spouse the way heaven does. Past the behavior. Past the anger. Past the silence. And into the wounds that shaped them. So that is what I do now. Everywhere I go. Every couple I meet. Every broken marriage I encounter. I tell them. Do not wait until someone stops breathing to start fighting for the breath of your marriage. Thank you for listening. If this testimony touched you, share it with any married couple you know. Someone's covenant may depend on hearing it. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and watch the next testimony on your screen.